on the computer. Okay, cool. So a few more people may pop in as we go. We just got off our big planning meeting. So,
nice.
But as I mentioned to you, we are doing this crazy little conference. It's the Age of Conversation. So it is all about drawing people out and having conversation or spurring on conversation. But because we all have Zoom fatigue, and as much as we love looking at our pretty little faces here, it gets tiring. I wanted to do a couple of sessions that are ear only, just audio, and have screens turned off, have people literally just dial in so they can walk the dog or make the kid a sandwich without having to worry about it. And so having you help us, how, like, I used to be able to do it, but now I see people and I had a phone call the other day and I realized she couldn't see me nodding. So take us back to the time where we had to give verbal cues and not visible cues.
Right? That's so funny. And I'm currently working on like a lot of webinars myself right now where we, in my current role, I work with like at a marketplace. It's called Wisant, where we sell tutors, which is really timely right now. But tutors come on, and we're actually doing a bunch of webinars where we have all of the audience their screens are turned off, but the tutor's presenting material. So it's a little bit different. But back in the day, kind of going back to that, it was all about. It's kind of like all about preparation, like conversation should happen kind of organically, but there's actually a lot of prep work, as the hosts and the moderators would know. Things we would do would be just kind of, and I don't know what kind of access you all have to your attendee list, but sending out a poll if possible, like what kind of topics are you interested in that's relating to like the main topic.
And I think we're going to figure out some topics, and we'll figure out kind of a key anchor person.
Mm-hmm.
But then from there, starting with the how many people is right to have on the call part.
That's a good question. We used to have, on big major calls, and if you have the ability to keep everybody muted with the ability to hand raise or submit questions, you could have a couple hundred, if you want.
Okay, good.
But some of our smaller console calls worked really well with anywhere between, 10 to 40 people, knowing that there's always maybe only like 3 or 4 people who actually are like really speaking at it, and really like creating the engaging conversation. And it's okay if not everybody is speaking, because a lot of people just kind of want to tune in and hear either what other people are saying, they want their questions and, to be validated because they're thinking the same thing, but a lot of people are kind of shy or they're multitasking. So,
yeah. Okay, so we are thinking we're going to run it in Zoom, but we're only going to give them the dial-in so we can see who needs to be muted and kind of manage that from an admin side. But then take me through, I know you put together some things, the pre-event questionnaire of sending out, getting what topics they want to cover. I think we're going to have that part. But then when you were saying attendee homework, so researching your attendees and understanding their background, is it really just knowing who's on the call?
Yeah, really knowing who's on the call, but understanding maybe, it seems like maybe a little overkill, but it was really helpful in my experience. Where you understand their role, their level within the organization. So that might help with a little bit of, what angle they're coming into the meeting with. And then, we would, whenever possible, get on phone calls with people ahead of time and say, hey, look, we're having this upcoming session. We want to make sure everyone's getting the most value out of it. What are the things you want to cover off on? What are the things that you really want to talk about? And kind of glean and capture all of that information. But in the same conversation, also try to identify anyone who's an expert in any of those subtopics too. So that way you kind of have, what I was calling like, you have your cheat sheet ahead of time, like, oh, I talked to, John, for example, and he's interested in A, B, and C topics, but he's also really good and has background in this one topic. So if anyone else asks about it, and no one is responding in the conversation, then I, as the moderator, can say, hey, John, I think you have experience with this. Do you have any insights that you can share? So those conversations, they only take like 15 or 20 minutes to do, but that prep work with each individual person is really good, because then, it prepares the moderator really well, knowing like who can I call on? Who can I depend on in case, you know, the conversation's not happening organically?
So when they join, how do you know who's on the call? How do you take roll? Because if you have 100 people, that's crazy.
Right. Get to know your tool really well. On our side, we could, you know, we had the phone numbers.
Yeah.
We either had phone number or email that would show up. And so there was the host moderator, and then there was the second like back end moderator who was making sure everyone, you know, who was on the call was supposed to be there. And we had a record of all of those things. So at registration, I would make sure you're taking phone number or email, and just making sure, like, whatever platform you're using, making sure you understand how the person is entering when they register. So they might use their name, they might use a phone number, they might use their email. So try to have all of that information available and cross-check it against your reservation list. And, you know, we just would manually enter that. I'm sure that the platforms have evolved a little bit since then, but I would just get to know your platform a little bit ahead of time.
Okay. And then, so do you start it out like it's a speaker doing a presentation or like an interview? What's the best way?
We've done, you know, I've done a couple different ways. You know, if there's somebody, depending on what the topic is, if there's somebody that can do like a very informal case study, you know, without having, you know, since you're not doing any on-screen anything, in those conversations, if you've identified a subject matter expert, someone who has really good experience on your topic, I would say, you know, use that conversation to say like, actually, this is a really good example of, you know, what we want to cover. Would you be interested in just speaking about this at the opening of our conversation to help kick off discussion? And, you know, more times than not, if somebody's an expert in something, they'll be thrilled to do it. I mean, if you're like a thought leader, they'll be really happy about that. So, you know, after that, I would just kind of guide them and say, you know, if they say yes, just say, you know, we need 3 to 5 minutes on the topic. And yeah, any, you know, explain the same experience you had with, that you shared with me, with everybody else, and then also talk about results and KPIs and anything like that. Keep it to 3 to 5 minutes, and then we would open it up for discussion to the rest of the group.
And what was the right time? 30 minutes, an hour?
It really depends. We would always say up to an hour. But also knowing that sometimes, you know, you can really cover off on all your material within 20 minutes, 30 minutes. So you know, I would hold an hour, but, you know, be open to it maybe being shorter.
Okay. Did you have people join and say, hey, it's John, hey, it's Kate, hey, it's...
Yeah, I think so. With our community, we did. You know, I don't know entirely, like with your format, you know, if you end up doing a really large group, that might be overwhelming. Mm-hmm. But if it's a smaller group, I would definitely have people, you know, introduce themselves with their name, company, and their title when they come on the call.
Okay. And then you mentioned in your notes, it was find out about topics they're interested in discussing, and then ask in relation to topic X, what things do you want to walk away knowing more about? Is that a pre-event question, or is that at the beginning of the call question?
Definitely pre-event question, because I think that, you know, under your big main topic, that'll help you kind of identify your subtopics that you want to plant throughout in case the conversation is not happening organically. Because sometimes you can propose one question, the moderator will say, you know, does anyone have experience with this? And then 1 or 2 people chime in, and then the conversation doesn't go anywhere. So, you know, having 3 or 4 questions prepared based off of those, you know, I'd say like subtopics would be really helpful. And that's where, you know, crowdsourcing that information ahead of time is really useful.
And that was usually just through a survey or email blast?
You know, now currently I'm doing surveys, and I find that to be really useful. But, you know, when you and I used to work together, that was a lot of pre-phone calls and emails.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. But if you're doing a larger group, a survey might, you know, hit a lot more people.
Yeah. And then the pre-event questionnaire and interviews, that's really how you're shaping the conversation, which is with those first 5 to 10 people that you're going to kind of prep for it. So it's, we were discussing on our last call, the concept of the fishbowl type, where you have people that are going to talk and everyone else is just the audience to watch that conversation happen.
Oh, nice.
figure like in an audio setting, this is similar. You're going to have your 5 or 10 people that you've prepped to say, hey, you guys are going to have a conversation. Other people can chime in, but I'm going to rely on you guys.
Right. Yeah, you could. I mean, yeah, you could position it as a kind of videoless panel in a way, you know. Yeah. And in that case, have you done a lot of panels? I mean, I would just have your moderator ready to go and prep your panelists with all of the questions ahead of time. Yeah, and then same thing. Just let your audience raise their hand or submit questions through your platform.
Did all the ones you did feel kind of like that panel discussion, or did people really open up and jump in and talk?
I have not done a videoless panel, so I haven't done like the fishbowl. I actually did a panel webinar 2 weeks ago, and I saw really great engagement from it. You know, we did a lot of prep work. We had like a run-through session beforehand just to prep the panelists because it was open to public and the media. But previously, you know, without video, we never had it set up exactly that style. It was kind of more either like quick case study and then conversation, or open it up for a conversation.
All your community calls were that format, the case study, conversation, case study.
Yeah. Unless we had an all hands, you know, which would include, you know, up to like 700 people. Like if we had the FTC on or anything like that, where, you know, we would have someone from the organization moderate, a subject matter expert, and then open it up for questions.
Okay. So talk to me about the back end, your moderation. You had 2 people managing the session.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the moderator, the one who's, you know, public facing, they kind of, you know, everyone needs to block for them because their main goal is to focus on the conversation and making sure, you know, that they're the host of the party, essentially, and that, you know, everything's running smoothly on the customer side. And there's usually one channel of communication. So I don't know if you use Slack or any instant messaging tools, but there's one line of communication, and the only person who's allowed to talk to them during that point is the back-end moderator. And so the back-end moderator is the one who has the RSVP list. They should be well versed in the tool ahead of time. They should be doing the run through ahead of time. You know, and then they can watch the RSVP list versus, you know, who's actually attending, try to match and make sure that everyone who's there should be there, you know, if that's a concern at all. You know, with Zoom bombing and all that stuff, it's a new concern. But, you know, just checking to make sure the RSVP list is good, and that, you know, they're also muting if necessary, if that's a feature in your tool, and then also monitoring any chat forums. So, you know, like Zoom webinars is something I use. We have Q&A and a chat forum. So our backend moderator watches both, feeds questions over to the moderator through Slack. Yep. And at the same time, if things get a little stale, they're also in that channel communicating with folks saying, hey, does anyone have any questions? Feel free to submit your questions through the Q&A platform. So that person is really just the back end, you know, making sure all the magic's happening.
Okay. So how do you open up this thing? It's all like where my eyes are closed, I can't see anything, and you're introducing the conference call. Walk me through that.
Yeah, so I would have your host, moderator, you know, they have their cheat sheet in front of them, but I would have a script ready to roll. Introduce the topic, introduce what you'll be talking about, introduce any, you know, if you're doing a fishbowl, or if you have somebody who's presenting an opening case study, I would introduce that person.
You do like rules of engagement at the beginning, or is that emailed out in advance?
Yeah, and I would set those expectations for the discussion. You know, just say we're on this platform. Here are the ways that you can submit questions, and you know, also I would just say, like, this is a conversation, and it's meant to be had amongst you all. This is, you know, you can use safe space or not, but you say, this is a safe space. Everybody is free to submit your questions, and, you know, let them know how to. And then, you know, hand it off either to the subject matter expert who's going to do a case study, or kind of start off with your first question, either to a panel or to the group.
Okay. And you had in your notes, crickets, when there's crickets.
It's more common than not. Even though you set the expectation that you're going into a room and everybody wants to talk, sometimes, hopefully, you've identified people who, through your homework, you've identified people who are ready to talk and want to talk. But be prepared that some people are just coming to listen and they don't feel any social pressure to speak at all, and they'll let it get silent if they want to. So if you kick off that conversation and there's case study and you've asked a question, and no one has responded to it, I would maybe propose a second question.
What's the right amount of time to wait in awkward silence?
Gosh, time in awkward silence, I feel like seconds feels like an hour. So I would say maybe 10 seconds, really, that might even be too long. But the moderator can kind of feel it out. But I would say, maybe like 10 seconds or something.
Okay.
But after they propose that, if there's no answer, feel free to pivot to the next question. If the same thing happens, then at that point, I would maybe call on one of your pre-identified subject matter experts or somebody that's had a question or had an interest in something. So depending on what your topic is, you could say, if there's crickets, hey, John, I understand that you are interested in these things. What are your thoughts? And then that maybe invites John to speak up and say, yeah, here's my experience with X, Y, Z. And hopefully from there, someone else raises their hand to respond. But if not, it's back onto you to kind of prompt that response.
1 second, the dog wants out. Give me a sec. Every time my children throw the dog in the room, they close the door and she can't get out. Okay. So, obviously, and Nicole and I do this all the time with our unrestricted hotness events where it feels very organic to the audience, but in fact, we are pretty rigid on what's going to happen next. So you prep those people with, if there's silence, you will be the first I'm going to call on, or do you just say, hey, throughout the event, be ready, I may call on you?
You still want it to feel kind of organic for those people too, but I would absolutely, take those questions, the questions they have or the expertise they have. And I would say, this is really helpful information. Would you be okay if I call on you in the conversation if it makes sense to?
Okay. And then when people do start talking, at what point do you let the conversation actually go, or do you interrupt or pull people back?
If I start talking and Liz, sometimes she can't even get a word in edgewise for 20 minutes.
Well, that is such a good problem to have, is that your audience is so engaged. I would use your subtopics as your pillars. So the good problem to have is that a topic takes off. And if it seems like it's happening very organically and it's really engaging and there's a handful of people all participating, I would let that happen for a while. Amount of time is really up to you to decide, if it's the first question and it's going on for 10 minutes, great. But, at that point, if it starts to get too narrow in focus or too tactical or too focused on something that's kind of drifted away from the original topic, I think it's okay for the moderator at that point to kind of insert themselves when there's a breath or a pause in discussion.
So just saying, enough already, not a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But no, it's really great to just kind of chime in and say, this is really great. And I would, at that point, I think it's great for the moderator to kind of summarize everything they heard, just to make sure that everyone feels very validated. You're reiterating the learning points. And then you can say, this is great. Moving on to this next topic, then you move on to your subtopic from there.
I love that. This is such a great framework for doing this, whether it's on ear or on screen. This is so good.
And it feels very much like just hosting a dinner party, right? You're trying to keep everybody entertained, and so you're a little bit of a juggler of all your friends, right?
The difference being, people feel like they must contribute when they're in person. They feel a little like they must contribute when they're on screen. They don't feel at all like they have to contribute when they're on ear.
Right. Exactly. Which is why it feels counterintuitive to prep a lot of that, but it actually it helps so much. It helps so much. It preps the folks you've talked to because they almost feel obligated or like obligated in a good way. They feel like indebted to the conversation to make sure it's successful, and they also feel like a little bit like a thought leader themselves because they're offering up their expertise.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I have, Liz, can I interrupt and ask a question?
Yes.
Okay, so this is all super helpful. Thank you so much. But we aren't going to actually know who is going to be in each session from an attendee perspective because they're RSVPing to the event, but not to each session. So for comparison, what we have talked about in the video sessions is if you want to join in, leave your camera feed on. If you don't, turn it off. But how do we kind of replicate that? So I guess the short story is there's no way to really research our attendees and identify a couple sort of, advocates and chatty Cathys. How do we navigate that in audio only, where there's no visual and we don't know in advance who the attendees are going to be? Do you have any suggestions for that?
In that scenario, that's really that's helpful. In that scenario, I might try, if I were you, still try to identify maybe your case study kickoff person at that point. And in that case, also ensure that everyone's introducing themselves. They can do it camera on or camera off, but I would almost at that point make it a requirement so that your moderator, your host, and your back-end moderator can kind of try to pivot from there and understand who's in the room, who can we potentially call on. So that's when you're asking, like, what's your name, your title, your company. I don't know if they're all from the same company, but if you understand, like, generally who's there, the back-end moderator can be taking all of those notes and help try to, work with the host to kind of keep it focused, keep it strategic. But that's also then at that point where your pre-event polling, I think, would really come in handy and help you with kind of setting up those pillar topics.
Yeah, I think it will take a lot more pre-work where we do identify thinking of it as a panel discussion and making sure they know it's not a panel discussion, but it's almost like you have ringers. Like you ask these 5 people to join and you tell them that you will probably be calling on them because you know they're going to be there.
Yeah, and in that case, it's fair. If they're expecting that, then I think that makes absolute sense.
Mm-hmm. I think that's going to be a fun experiment. It may be a complete flop, or it may be absolutely amazing.
We've done a lot of those back in the day, and I think, like, really the intel that you're going to get from the polls and everything will help you develop really engaging content that people are going to show up for.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the topics are specifically, but one thing we always learned was that people really love to talk about tools that they're using, those are like digital tools and things like that. So if you see trends as, tactical as it seems for the industry, gather those trends together because people are obviously interested in them.
So Kate, I'm wondering, do we even consider some of the audio conference sessions do have a secondary registration? You can join the session, but we need you to complete this Survey Monkey or just do something really, really lightweight, but so that you can catch it and then send them the dial-in info. I don't know.
Yeah, that's maybe. I think it depends on the content, right? And is it sort of a little bit of didactic with then like discussion and sort of reaction, or is it literally just like bottoms up conversation?
I think it has to have a topic. I mean, it's going to be like any of our dial-up or dial-up discounts where there's a pre-planned topic. You've got a conversation leader and facilitator. You got a few ringers in the audience. And then maybe you say, if you're interested in joining the session, here's what it's going to be about. Answer these questions. And or maybe we don't. Maybe we do it just like the dial-up disco where they join and they're in. We can try it both ways and see and report back.
Yeah.
That's the point of this event.
Yep. We'll figure it out as we go, right?
We like building planes while they fly.
Yeah. I don't think anyone's mastered this yet.
That's the good part.
Yes, exactly.
We have an opportunity to lead. We are pioneers now in the new world of taking people off screen. It used to be pioneering in the past.
I think it's great. I think it's awesome. I think people are getting a lot of video burnout for sure.
Yeah, exactly. It was funny. We had our, one of our events last week before, it's all blur, where we asked everybody for about 10 minutes to turn off the camera and like try to continue on with the event with the camera off. And people, when they came back on camera, they were like, that was so hard because the moment I did it, I immediately started doing email and lost the conversation. I was like, oh, it's been so quick to change your brain. That's amazing. Maybe, you know what, maybe to force people off screen, we even make it I think SEMA did this, a walk and talk, where like you have to be away from your screen for this one. We want you up and moving. This is a conversation marathon or something.
That's interesting. We, so, you know, on the tutor side, we actually saw some success. I thought it was crazy, where the tutor essentially told students to stop watching the video and do an assignment and come back. And we actually saw, like, just from the like the engagement, you know, like tracking on the, like attendance, we actually saw students like drop and then come back on within like a couple of minutes just to come back to the session. So that was really interesting, like giving them an assignment was kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder if even that conversation can be a go do something thing. That's interesting. I think we have some options to play with.
Yeah.
This was so great, Cora. Anybody else have any questions for her?
No, that was amazing.
Yeah, it was so great.
Sorry, I haven't eaten all day and I didn't want to like stuff my face in front of you guys.
Yeah, no, I think this is great. I think it's definitely going to be helpful to take some of these tips back to the session administrator team. And again, depending on the format, the moderating and facilitating will look a little different, but this has been super helpful. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, thank you again, Cora. And if you actually wanted to be a conversation facilitator during the actual event, you let us know.
Oh, I was always happy on the backside or on the back end, making the magic happen. But if you guys need anything else, please don't hesitate. This is a lot of fun.
You're the best. It was so good to see you too after 5 years.
It was good to see you too.
Well, thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.